The revolution's
Yeah,
begun.
see that one a little brighter.
Oh,
The time to stand up has come.
Something got reset.
We are the rocking of the throne. We are the rocking of the throne.
All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome, one and all. This is the Dissidence podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming back to the show for a second time the founder of the Bernie or Bust movement, Victor Tiffany. Victor, welcome back, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, Keaton, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we spoke, I believe it was in July of last year. And my position has certainly changed since then. I've sort of made that known. I'm on board the Bernie or Bust train. Iowa was really the tipping point for me. Just came to the realization that, if this party is going to run their primaries this way, then they're not worth supporting. And I'm certainly not going to pledge my support to anyone but Bernie in November. And if he's not the nominee, I really can't support the nominee at this point unless it's him. Certainly, living in New York made that an easier decision, but I feel pretty confident that that would be the case no matter where I happen to live. So we talked about 7 months ago now, which time really flew. But you mentioned to me that the Bernie or Bust strategy has evolved a bit since then, even independent of some of the developments. Is that right? Or did you kind of make these changes as things played out?
No, it developed as we gained more information about what happened last time. When we said in Philadelphia in 2016, nominate Sanders or lose in November, it was a threat and bluster. We didn't have the polling data to be certain that that was going to be the case. In fact, on election day, I was certain Clinton was going to be elected. It wasn't until we ran into a survey of Berners, voted for Bernie in the primary, and then how did they vote in the general election? That was after our conversation. And we found out that enough of his supporters were independent voters, right? Genuine swing independents who registered for the Democratic Party, voted for Bernie, and then when he didn't get the nomination, they voted for Trump. And so that's a lot of people. It was about somewhere between 1.25 and 1.5 million of his supporters did that. And it was enough that they could have claimed responsibility in Michigan, in Wisconsin, and in Pennsylvania for Clinton's defeat. But they didn't because they're not organized. There's no Sanders Trump webpage. There's no spokesperson to claim response. They're like a force of nature. They're like a tornado. And when we realized that really they are the unwitting enforcers of or bust, it really changed our whole attitude. We're not saying, you better vote for Bernie or we're not with you. We're saying this time the whole primary season is defined as Bernie or bust. Those swing voters make it clear. And I'm going to look at some other data during this conversation that might undermine it. I want to examine the naysayers, although nobody's taking issue with our analysis yet. I'm going to look at ways in which they could and analyze those voters. But the point is, when we realize, holy mackerel, these swing voters are plentiful enough that we don't have to tell people, look, you better vote for Bernie or else, which is what it was last time. Our approach is, hey, these swing voters have already predetermined the outcome of this year's election. If Bernie's not the nominee, they're not voting. They're going to vote for Trump. That's like 2 bites out of the apple. So even if it's 1.25 million of them, that's 2.5 million of a vote swing, right? Because the Democrats lose 1.25 and Trump will gain 1.25. And by the way, the reason they vote this way is this particular narrow band of swing voters vote for change, right? They don't want the status quo. They don't want to keep things going the way it is. So they wanted the real change, which is Bernie. And then when that didn't come through, they picked the next best thing from their view. which is not ideological. It's just we want change. So knowing about them changes our attitude completely. We don't have to beg anyone. And you alluded to this in your recent post on Bernie or Bust. Isn't there a way? Isn't there? Because Bernie or Bust is so demanding. It's almost an assault on democratic predisposition, sensibilities, democratic sensibilities. Basically, it's you're voting our way, or screw you guys. We're going to sabotage your nominee.
Right. It's an electoral leverage strategy, as you put it to me last time. And I think what you're saying now is that Bernie or Bust has sort of become bigger than just the Bernie or Bust movement. It's actually become a foregone conclusion. And I believe you even put it that way. You had a piece that you wrote, an op-ed that Newsweek picked up and got blasted all over the place. Is that how you put it in that?
That was, it was 800 words. And unfortunately, we focused on the various meanings of Bernie or Bust and didn't have, at the end of our allotted 800 words, enough room to talk about these swing voters. So the last sentence is, Bernie or Bust is a foregone conclusion, but we never got to elaborate on the logic of that, the math of that. How do we be so bold as to make that assertion? And the answer is to do with these swing voters. They are the unwitting enforcers of or bust. So I don't like to say that the Bernie or Bust movement has enlarged. It doesn't include them. I had a lengthy interview recently with a journalist, Wall Street Journal reporter who lives in San Francisco, flew to Ithaca to come in my office and find out how the hell we did this in 2015, 2016. And I explained to her, we polled the Bernie or Bust people, right? We have their email contact. So we did a survey. How did they vote in the general election? Only 3% of us voted for Trump. And that was probably Nevada, where Jill Stein wasn't on the ballot and there was no write-in option. In Nevada, Trump was the least of all terrible bad options, other than the possibility of leaving that line blank. And I want to come back to that too. So we know these swing voters aren't Bernie Busters. They are they're there. They give the Democrats a choice this year. You either nominate Bernie Sanders and let's unite behind him, or Trump will be elected, because they're going to see to it. They are going to enforce or bust in a way that we can't, because
right, and unwittingly, because there's no conscious leverage strategy there on their part. It's just their order of preference, naturally.
Yeah. Yep. It's a strange position that we're in now, because we have more confidence in our whole statement, nominate Bernie or lose in November. That's no longer bluster. That's a fact of the matter. So when just to go back to your article that you posted about Bernie or Bust, how you are now Bernie or Bust, you said there's got to be a softer way to present this for people who are still, so that we're not assaulting democratic sensibilities with a demand. And these swing voters provide it for us. And so this is how I use it on Twitter. If somebody is Bernie or Bust, I encourage them to take the Bernie or Bust pledge, plug in at a better level. And I introduce them to Bernie or Bust TV that you've been a guest on. If somebody's anti-Bernie or Bust, they're using a hashtag to criticize us, I just inform them, look, I hate to tell you this, but swing voters, I use hashtag swing voters matter. And then I continue beyond the hashtag, far more than Bernie or Bust and the Bernie Bros combined.
Right.
That gets their attention, I think. And then I provide a swingvotersmatter.us link to our website page that explains the math of all this. The 1.25 to 0.5 million who voted for Trump last time, the 3 polls in 2019 that confirm about the same number of Bernie supporters are going to do it again. So they're still there. They're not any more numerous, or they're not any less numerous. They're still about the same number. And so we know that how they're going to vote. They're telling pollsters how they're going to vote. So the whole premise, this whole certainty that we have, is dependent upon the current economic status. This is important. We always try to add this. Under current economic conditions, Bernie or Bust is a foregone conclusion. If the stock market crashes, then everything's wide open. Buttigieg could get elected, or even Biden, for God's sake. because a larger mass of independent voters will shift from, oh, this guy in the White House doesn't know what the hell he's doing, to let's try blue again. That's what happened in 2008, when a full quarter of Hillary Clinton's primary voters voted for John McCain, a quarter of them. And Obama still got elected because of what I just suggested. The stock market had crashed. We were at the front end of the Great Recession, and enough independents decided, forget the Republican, I'm voting blue, even though it was Bill Clinton's deregulation of Wall Street that caused that great crash, right? He deregulated it, allowed them to get it to mix banking and investment and insurance, and it just created this huge bubble through the housing market and these what they call the interest rates that blow up after 2 or 3 years, and that whole thing just blew the whole system apart. So all those party unity my ass Clinton supporters voting for McCain didn't have the impact they would a year like this. And I used to say, just going back to just talking about those party unity my ass, I used to think Bernie would have won last time, right? Because he had more support. The polls indicated he did better versus Trump than, and those swing voters would have gone with Bernie. But those party unity my assholes probably would have come out and voted for Trump. So I don't think anybody could have beaten Trump, because I think there was just too much rebellion. You didn't see the party unity my ass because Clinton had it all locked up. They knew they had it locked up because it was rigged. They were in control of the DNC. I mean, that's what Donna Brazile laid out in that Political article explaining how the Clinton campaign controlled the funding, controlled the messaging, controlled the staffing of the Democratic convention committee. So there's no way anybody, Jesus Christ, could have run against her and he would have lost because she had it all rigged. So they knew that there was no need for party unity my ass. But had Bernie somehow managed to win the nomination anyway, they would have come back from the dead, and they would have buried Bernie by voting directly for Trump. I'm certain of it.
Well, whether that's true or not, we, in a sense, might get to find out this time, because now Bernie is, of course, the front runner after the results in Nevada this weekend. You could even call him the prohibitive front runner. I mean, he is now the odds-on favorite, no doubt about it, to win the nomination, unless there is some sort of sabotage at the convention itself. The only other candidate who has any prayer of doing it, I think, in terms of overtaking him in the delegate count, and even this, I mean, to say he has a prayer is being generous, would be Michael Bloomberg, because he's the only one who's going to have the resources to stick it out through the end. So you guys mentioned how you sort of adjusted your leverage strategy to making a more macro argument about the just dynamics of the race more broadly, especially in these swing states. I argued, though, in that piece that I wrote, which you guys were kind enough to share out, and thank you guys so much for doing that. There are, I'm not sure if I put this in the piece that there are two, because I hadn't really encountered too much of this yet, but there are two groups of people who do, I think, need to hear a leverage strategy. The original, unfiltered, no bullshit, just Bernie or bust, we will fuck you up if you do this. There are two kinds of people who need to hear that. One are supporters of Michael Bloomberg, for reasons I laid out in the article that I wrote. But there's a second group of supporters who have just come to light now, meaning since that last debate in Las Vegas, who are people who are now outwardly floating the notion of overturning the results on the second ballot at the convention should Bernie secure a plurality but not a majority of pledged delegates. I had an interaction with a guy this morning online. He's, I don't know what his official title is, but he's involved with the local Democratic group here in Orange County in New York. And he's just openly floating the idea that if we could stop him from getting 1,991 delegates on the first ballot, we may be able to stop him on the second. And I told him flat out, I said, if you do that, we're going to destroy your party. Not only will you lose to Trump, but the Democrats will never win again. It will be a dumpster fire should that happen.
Well,
and I think those two groups of people
they'll
need to hear that.
Yeah, no doubt they'll lose to Trump. I don't know if we would be powerful enough to destroy the party. It depends on how Sanders responds to it. But yeah, there's no doubt they'd lose to Trump. I mean, that whole approach, that whole strategy. My reply to someone saying that is, you must want Donald Trump to be elected, because there's no way anyone else, there's no way Bloomberg, there's no way Biden, there's no way anyone else can win.
Especially under those circumstances, especially if there is a usurpation at the convention, forget it. The Bernie people will leave en masse, whether he comes with us or not.
Right. Right. That was one thing that came up in this debate that I was listening to before I came over is even Bernie doesn't support Bernie or bust. That's right. Bernie's a sheepdog, and Bernie or bust is the antidote to the common sheepdog. We are not going to be herded in like fucking sheep into the neoliberal fold. That's just wasn't going to happen last time. It's not going to happen this time. Cass Sunstein has a Bernie or bust story or article out in some free press publication, and he pretty much gets it. We are outraged, but what he doesn't get is, so the nominee has to suck up to us a little bit. And I tweeted him. He's on Twitter, and I let him know, hey, we're not going to fall for that shit. We're not going to fall for promises, empty promises. We're not going to fall for empathy, fake empathy, real empathy. Forget it. If it's not Bernie Sanders, the Democrats will lose. And then I did the swing voter thing for him. Not sure he'll read the tweet or click on the link, but that's our reply to some of these people. That's got to be the reply. So there's two points here. That's got to be the reply, that anybody who's against Bernie is basically coming out in a logic that they're unaware of, but they're operating in a logic and a context that means, and it has to be translated for them by us who understand this environment, this milieu, this leveraged milieu of Bernie's swing voters, that look, if you don't want Bernie, his enough of his supporters, not near a majority, but enough, will swing to Trump, and you will lose the election. So if you're not with Bernie at this point, if you're trying to make sure Bernie loses, you will make sure Trump wins. So that's one point. The other point has to do with this plurality versus majority. And that's where Alan and I are arguing it's time for Bernie or bust. It's still time for Bernie or bust. We still have to convey to these Democrats, maybe not the wine track, suburban-based, middle-class voters who, are vote along the lines of identity politics, but many others who might be for Biden for whatever reason. You've got to let them know that he just can't win. That these swing voters are there, and they're enforcing Bernie or bust. So even if you don't like Bernie or bust, it doesn't matter. Sure, there's not enough of us, unless it's a very, very tight election, and it could be. There's not enough of us to sway the election.
But there will be enough of us.
Right.
If they overturn the results on the second ballot of the convention, I guarantee you beyond any doubt there will be enough to swing it to Trump.
It's almost happening with every move that they make, every counter move. When somebody comes out and, Bernie, the Russians are trying to help Bernie. Boom, more Bernie or bust comes in.
Yep.
Nevada,
absolutely.
There was some fuckery in Nevada. There was one precinct that I've got the Facebook page, and we're going to try to get somebody to actually report on this. But this burner was this precinct captain wouldn't sign off on the results because they kept forcing recounts, and they kept twisting it. Even though Bernie had something like 4 times as many supporters in the room as any of the other candidate, they kept calling it a tie.
Well, did you hear Mayor Pete is saying there are discrepancies in results right now this morning? He came out as he's asking for recounts. Fucking guy lost by like 25 points. He's asking for recounts.
He's right. There were in his favor. And sometimes it would, in this one room where they kept repeating the count, sometimes he'd benefit, and sometimes when they recount, he'd lose. But in the end, despite the fact that there were 4 times as many Bernie supporters as anyone else in the room, they called it a tie, 4-4 delegates between Bernie and Buttigieg. That shit gets out, Bernie or bust will once again explode. Because we're just, the burners who don't want to really vote Green Party or stay home or whatever because they really don't want Trump, they're also fed up with this jerry-rigging or this rigging of the system. When they hear stories like that, and they hear about other things that were Iowa obviously brought Bernie or Bust back with a vengeance. It actually trended the day after that caucus on
That's
Twitter.
right.
I never saw it. I knew it was trending because I always look at the feed from Bernie or Bust, the hashtag Bernie or Bust. So I look at it to see what's going on. Maybe I can recruit some of these people, get them to take the pledge, and so forth. And I was looking at it that next day thinking, oh my God, there's 360 going an hour. Why isn't this thing trending? And apparently it did trend for a while. The Wall Street Reporter told me that. The Wall Street Report journalist told me she saw it trending that day, but I missed it. I never saw it trending. But yeah, the more they screw around, the more they rig this thing, the more it's going to be Bernie bust. And there's also another problem with Bloomberg, and I thought you might be leaning in this direction in your post on Bernie bust. Benjamin Dixon is a podcaster. He's got the Progressive Army behind him. I'm not sure if he's the leader of the army or what his relationship to the Progressive Army is. I wanted to come on his podcast again this time around and talk about Bernie bust, and he was like, "No way! There's a fascist in the White House. I'm not going to have it. We've got to unite and get behind, the nominee." So he blocked me on Twitter. He wants nothing to do with Bernie bust. But
sorry, go ahead.
But he's the guy who uncovered those early Mayor Bloomberg descriptions of stop and frisk and his rationalizations, racist rationalizations for it, and he presented it even on the Hill on the Rising with Crystal Ball and Sager. So he's the guy, and now he's tweeting, if it's Bloomberg versus Trump, I'm staying home.
Right.
So what we have here is not just Bernie or bust. There's also this very strong. It's not organized yet. I'd like to see it happen. There's an awful lot of never Hillary out there. There needs to become a never Bloomberg because they got to understand, just like you said a little while ago, if it's a Bloomberg supporter, he's got to hear it. Look, it's Bernie or bust. And if Bloomberg's the nominee, we're not, if it's a choice between a racist, sexist, homophobic, billionaire Republican and Donald Trump, we're not going to vote for that Republican. We're just not going to vote for a Republican this time, and that's what Bloomberg is offering us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And, I think Benjamin Dixon has done some great work. It was obviously great work that he did getting that tape out there. And, I listen to him sometimes. I like him quite a bit. But in a way, the Bloomberg rise had somewhat of a strange effect on him. Not that it had an effect on him, but one of the things that Bloomberg has done to a lot of progressives is he has almost sort of manufactured consent for the other centrists in the race. Like Benjamin Dixon is a very committed burner, but Benjamin Dixon went on some podcast and said, like, I would carry Pete Buttigieg to the nomination to stop Bloomberg, right? There became an anyone but Bloomberg kind of thing, which is not Bernie or bust. It's anyone but Bloomberg. But the point that I made in my article was that, look, at the end of the day, unless there is a convention superdelegate coup, in which case all bets are off, the whole fucking thing gets burned to the ground at that point. But absent that, you're either going to have Bloomberg winning the nomination outright or Bernie winning the nomination outright. I think it's highly, highly unlikely that the former comes true, but it's the only possible scenario at this point that I really see, because he's the only one with the resources to stay in and compete in all 50 states. And so if it's really absent that other option, in which case Benjamin Dixon said that if you screw us on the second ballot at the convention, he'll stay home. He did say that. Or if it's Bloomberg, I'll stay home. Then what he's really advocating is Bernie or bust. Because it's either three things are going to happen right now. Either Bernie's going to win the nomination, they're going to steal it on the second ballot in Milwaukee, or Bloomberg's going to win the nomination. So if those latter two options are unacceptable to you and would force you to stay home, then guess what? You're Bernie or bust, whether you know it or not.
That's right. I knew people, I've not interviewed, but just had conversations with people, bartenders and servers and so forth, who were Bernie or bust, and they never heard the expression before. They voted for Bernie in the primaries, and they voted for Jill Stein in the general election, and they never heard of Bernie or bust. I found that fascinating. It was just almost like a natural response for progressives who want to vote progressives, just don't want to support this neoliberal tyranny anymore. And it is tyranny. In fact, I'm thinking about rewriting the Declaration of Independence, treating it as an open source document, obviously listing different grievances. But I
That's
really
an awfully ambitious project.
well, I've started it last time around, and sort of dropped it. And I think it might be time to pick that up again and try another Declaration of Revolution. It'll be different terminology, you know. It's different problems, different scenario, but it might be fun, and I think it's worth it. I want to talk about the possibilities that I'm wrong. The groups of voters who voted for Trump or didn't vote at all. So there's the Bernie Busters. We're actually the least of the another candidate's problems. We really are. The swing voters, there's more of them, and they take 2 bites out of the apple. And Bernie's going to bring in people, you know, these poor people, these poorly educated people that we talk about on the Bernie or Bust TV show. This is Bernie's political revolution. When he uses that phrase, he's talking about empowering people, getting people who have given up on the electoral system altogether, poor people, you know, people who just don't vote, 90 million of us who don't vote. He wants to empower them, get them out there. So,
and by the way, sorry to cut you off, but the Nevada results showed that they're actually succeeding in doing that. Iowa and New Hampshire are weird states because they're mostly white states, kind of more comfortable, you know, voters, you know, with very niche issues, and it's retail politics, right? They invite you into their living room to sweet talk them, right? It's a different kind of thing. Nevada is a very diverse state, very labor-driven state, and 51% of caucus goers yesterday, we are recording this on Sunday, were first-time caucus goers. And
right.
Youth turnout was through the roof. Latino turnout was through the roof. So this is not just some pipe dream that we're cooking up in our head that we're going to turn new people out. We had a case, we had a sort of test run of this, and it worked like a charm yesterday. And I think on Super Tuesday, you're really going to see that work big time. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to inject that.
Alan and I agree that it won't be as potent in the primaries as it will be in the general election. But if Bernie's not the nominee, that's millions of votes that will not be coming out to vote. They're just right. They come out for social democrats or democratic socialists, someone offering higher minimum wage, free college. Again, they're poorly educated. They're not stupid and they're not lazy, but they just can't afford to go to school. But if you have, you know, childcare and free trade school or community college or state university, they'll go and get a degree and then pick themselves up in life. You know, so they'll come out for someone like Bernie's, offering them the program that they need, the agenda that they need to improve their life in the general election. And I hope you're right. I hope this continues, that this political revolution he's leading works during the primaries. And in which case, if that actually continues, and he said, we don't even need Bernie or Bust. I mean, he might be able to pull this majority needed off even without Bernie or Bust, just because of his political revolution and his army and his voter database and Burn app and everything else that they're doing. They may not even need us. But until we see that happening, we have to be pretty much nonstop Bernie or Bust, or at least stressing that these swing voters.
Yes, and I think Bernie or Bust is a way at this point. See, it's a weird kind of, it's almost counterintuitive, because you would almost think a Bernie or Bust message might be more necessary if we're losing, right? To sort of turn up the heat under people to get them to change their mind. But I'm not sure that's the case. Like, I'm getting close to being at, like, we just recorded a podcast last night where I said, look, it is time, if you're on the fence in this primary and you care about beating Trump, it's clear that there's a front runner now with major momentum right now. Undercutting him by nitpicking his message and you know, tearing apart his platform, or, you know, doing Oppo research dumps against him at this point, is weakening the front runner and weakening the party heading into November. And that's a sort of somewhat Bernie or Bust-esque kind of message. It's like, look, this train has left the station now. Like, we're going in this direction. And if you try to derail that train at this point,
you'll get Trump.
You're causing a train wreck, right?
Right.
Like, you're not helping anything at this point by saying, well, what's going to happen, if he's the nominee, and what's going to happen to the suburban women in the Virginia Beltway? Are they going to? It's like, listen, this is the plan. All right, the people are speaking. It's not like we're doing this in a back room somewhere. We're having votes. He's winning the votes, right? The people are speaking. This is the direction we're going in. So get on board and let's do it. And any moment's hesitation now is just hurting the overall goal of beating Donald Trump, if that's the most important thing to you.
It's a strange irony to have him as the front runner now, to have him leading the pack, because you're taking on different people for different reasons now.
Yes, yes, that's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah. So I just had an example on Twitter. Somebody was responding to somebody who was suggesting this bad op. Oh, it was responding to NBC, of course. The Trump's going to come out with all these early writings from Bernie Sanders, blah, blah, blah. And someone replied to that. And I just went back to NBC and said, you ought to change your name from NBC News to NBC Propaganda. And then there's another anti-Berner out there who was suggesting that Bernie has weaknesses and problems. And so I said, look, you can, if you're undermining Bernie at this point, you must want Donald Trump to be elected, because you're harming the front runner, and he's the only one that can beat Trump. He just is. So let's explore that. Let me express self-doubt. Let me look at these other voters out there and think, how might they vote in a way that undermines our certainty that because of these swing voters, that we are in a milieu. It's not just a threat. It's not just a promise. It's not just a leverage strategy. It's the milieu. It's the primary. It describes the primary. It's a whole different feeling we have. It's a whole different vibe. We are in a burn your bust situation. So let's deconstruct that in a way that nobody's bothering with so far. Maybe they don't take us seriously. I don't know. Let's start with 1.7 million people voted in 2016 and left the first line on the ballot blank. They just couldn't vote for Trump, so they just couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I just want to drive that home so people understand what we mean by that. They didn't stay home. They showed up to vote. They voted for, whatever, county clerk, state senator, Congress, blah, 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 and left the top line, which is the presidential ticket, blank.
Blank. 1.7. More of them than the Bernie or Trump swing voters. It's a massive amount. There's 50-some thousand in Michigan alone. So how might they vote? How might they vote in a way that that they didn't last time? So if it's Biden, who's Hillary Clinton with a penis, it's hard to believe that all of a sudden he's okay when she wasn't. But if it's Bernie, there's a good chance that's what we're after, is progress. Somebody offering us something we can actually, sort of like what Obama promised and never delivered on. Right? So those 1.7 million, they're obviously not going to go to Trump. They already didn't vote for Trump. So they're not a problem to worry about. Really. They're going to go blue, if anything, and probably not centrist, because they just rejected centrism 4 years ago. So now there were over 8 million Obama-Trump voters, swing voters, more than Bernie, more than Sanders Trump. And they were not the same people. I used to think they were the same people, but they're more likely Democrats who voted for Trump or independents who voted for Trump. But they're not the same group as the Sanders Trump swing voters I just recently discovered. So 3/4 of them approve of Trump. They're not coming back. They're gone. That leaves about 2 million who might come back, probably blue no matter who. So let's say they would vote for Biden. So that you have 2 million who would come back and vote for Biden, 1.5 million who aren't going to come back and vote for Biden. They're going to vote for Trump again, because that's what they're telling pollsters. So that leaves the difference of around 500,000 voters. And that's where Bernie or bust comes in. We can outnumber that slim margin. We can outnumber again. And we will certainly take Trump down, which leaves one more group of voters. Far more than those groups. I don't know about the Obama-Trump, because I don't know exactly how many of these people there are. Democrats who didn't vote at all. They stayed home. They didn't want Hillary, and they just stayed home. They didn't come out and leave the ballot blank, the first line blank, and vote down ballot. They just stayed home because she was so inspiring. How are they going to vote? So again, I go back to, are they going to come out for a centrist? They didn't come out for a centrist last time. They're going to come out for Biden because it's Hillary Clinton with a penis? I don't get why these Democrats who stayed home last time might come out this time. They could. That's the big question mark. If anybody's going to actually challenge our foregone conclusion analysis, it's based on them. But who's going to bring them out? Bernie has the army going after these people. Bernie has the turnout machine. So on those three levels of analysis, turnout, swing voters, and leverage. We already know where leverage is. I see people on Twitter saying, I'm not going to vote for Bernie. I'm for Warren, so I'm going to vote for Trump. All candidates have people like that. They swing, they'll just vote the other way. Hillary had them. Warren has them. Biden has them. Buttigieg has the fewest, according to polls. They all have people like that, and you just got to let them go. So Bernie, on leverage alone, Bernie or bust has got it. There's no Warren or bust. There's no Biden or bust. Bernie has the or bust vote, the leverage vote, the conscious, intentional leverage group, which is new. Swing voters is what most pollsters look at. How are they going to vote? Where are they going to swing? Well, what we know about that analysis, I just laid it out. Will the Obama-Trump swing voters come back for other candidates? Will they come back for Bernie? They have not been polled. So because they haven't been polled, it's a question mark. But what we do know are the people who were polled, which is the Sanders-Trump swing voters. So Bernie's got the swing vote because we know about them. We don't know about all of them, but we know enough to say that he's got the swing vote. We also show poll after poll indicating most independents, sorry, I gotta be careful, more independents support Bernie than any other Democrat. So he's got that covered. So what are these down ballot Democrats worried about? I don't get, but let me just finish this analysis. That's leverage, that's swing voters, both favor Bernie, and now turnout. And as you said, we're seeing the beginning of that finally in Nevada. This army of his going after these non-voters and getting them to come out and vote for the first time in the primaries, in caucuses, and in the general election. He's got his own turnout machine. He can actually probably defeat Trump without much support from the Democratic Party machine because he's got his own machine. He's practically a party in and of himself because he's got that machine, that army, what am I trying to say? That following that of dedicated people going door to door, making phone calls, making messages on their phone. And I see people on Twitter going, I'm off to Texas. I'm out of here. I'm going down to Texas to help Bernie. Yep. So he's got the turnout machines. And if the Democrats had a great turnout machine, where the fuck was it 4 years ago? They couldn't turn out for Hillary. They don't have a good turnout machine. So on that level of analysis, the three only levels of analysis for winning elections, turnout, swing voters, and leverage, and leverage is the least of their problems, or another candidate's problems. Of those three, Bernie's got all three. So
yeah, I mean, I
there's
think that's
no way another candidate is going to beat Donald Trump. And this isn't saying Bernie is definitely going to beat Donald Trump. I mean, be careful about that. Right. He can lose, but he's the only one who has a shot. In fact, I used to watch Shep Smith to sort of keep my eye on Trump. I figured if anyone, I don't trust MSNBC, and I don't really trust CNN. So I thought, well, if anyone's going to hold the Trump accountable, it's going to be Shep Smith. And he was doing a pretty good job of that. And then he left for whatever reason. So I'm still watching that news hour. It's Bill Hemmer now. And he had a guest on, a Democratic Party establishment, fretting about down party candidates. Oh, well, how are we going to win if Bernie's, socialist is top of the ticket? How about appealing to the voters he's bringing in? How about coming out with Medicare for all? Let's say, if you're nervous about that, Medicare for all with a private option, right? If you're nervous about embracing that policy 100%, just say, all right, as a member of Congress, I will ensure there is a private option. And I think that's how it's going to come out, because Congress sucks, right? It's not socialist or democratic socialist. So I think if we get something out of a Sanders campaign or a Sanders presidency on healthcare, that's what it's going to be. And he'll sign it as long as there's not tax provisions for the people who want to keep their private health care. If they want to pay their Medicare for all tax and premiums and co-pays and deductibles, let them have it. They're not harming anything. So, and I think that's how, after the sausage making, I think that's how it's going to come back to his desk, and he'll sign that bill. So if you're a down ballot Democrat and you're fretting about a socialist at the top of the ticket, how about embracing some of his ideas? Particularly, what are people worried about? Climate change. Okay, embrace the Green New Deal. Going to worry about paying for it? Learn modern monetary theory and understand that tripling, quadrupling the national debt is far less problematic than human extinction. You know?
Yeah.
We got to get our shit together on that one. So don't worry about the debt. If it triples and quadruples, that's not as important as saving the human race from climate catastrophe. And then finally, the Republican in this little discussion says, first he said, Bernie doesn't have a chance of beating Trump. And then he comes back and says, no, I think he probably has about a 20% chance of beating Trump. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to accept that. Bernie has a 20% chance of beating Trump. You know what? That's 20% more than any other nominee the Democrats can put forward. That's
I think your analysis is pretty good. I don't want to get into the weeds of like the policy points just because we're running a little low on time, and the sort of crux of this conversation is more strategy. But I think the 2 points that you make about leverage and swing voters could really, I think a good case can be made that they're really the same argument, because the reason a leverage strategy works is because Bernie has crossover appeal. Right. The only reason why somebody would say, well, fuck it, if it's not Bernie, I'm going to Trump, is because Bernie can appeal to potential Trump voters, right? I.e. swing voters, right?
They're more conservative, they're older, and they're whiter than most of Bernie's supporters.
Yes. Yep. And I agree with you that a lot of the Obama to Trump voters are gone. I think once you pull that trigger, it's tough to get you back. And also, let's not forget, a lot of Obama voters were conservatives who were disgusted with George W. Bush. That's why Obama was able to survive that the 25% party unity my ass segment of the Democrats who were, diehard for HRC and didn't come back to Obama in that general election. The only way Obama could have made up for that is by getting a lot of Republicans to vote for him. And I know personally a few people who are very conservative who enthusiastically supported Obama in that '08 race. And a lot of those same people, what do you know, voted for Trump in 2016 because they're just more naturally inclined to vote for Republicans. So I don't think the Obama to Trump voters can be really counted on. I think you make a good point about the leverage argument and the swing argument. The turnout argument is, of course, unique to Bernie Sanders. He's the only one with his own independent infrastructure that can actually drive turnout. We saw that in Nevada. Hopefully we will see that on a national scale on Super Tuesday. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the developments of the race is that as we become the front runner, I think Bernie or bust sort of becomes a way to just kind of nudge people. Like, it doesn't have to be like, we don't have to, tie them up in knots and push them up against the walls. Like, you better do what we want. It doesn't have to be that. Now, like you said, and like we've been getting at in this conversation, it's like, it's to the point where it's pretty clear that this is the plan as decided on by pluralities, if not majorities of Democratic voters as the primary rolls on. And so, like, listen, you're either down with the plan or you're going to naysay us the whole time and you're going to get Trump reelected. And I do think, and I'm glad you say this, this is a super important point to make, that we're not guaranteeing a Bernie victory. We're not saying Bernie's going to beat Donald Trump. I'm not comfortable saying that. I think Donald Trump is the favorite to win this race. I've said that from day one. does not mean I'm any less committed to getting Bernie Sanders elected. I just want to level with people because I want people to be very, very clear-eyed about the challenge that it's going to be to actually defeat this guy and this party. I mean, they are loaded with cash. He has a very loyal base, and it is harder. I mean, look, it is harder to sell Bernie's message this time than it would have been last time. Last time there was a boiling anti-establishment fervor. That was part of the zeitgeist last time.
Right.
This time it's less so because one of the anti-establishment guys became the president. And so naturally that takes half of that energy out of the air, right?
And
just by virtue of the fact that he's there. And the perception of a strong economy. But I mean, look, I still think we could rally enough people to understand that the economy is really not working for the majority of people. I mean, if we can't make that case, then there's no theory of the case for Bernie in the first place. Why would we be supporting him? Right? But you're right. I mean, propaganda is a powerful thing, as we both know. And they're going to be running on a strong economy, and that's going to be a challenge. No doubt.
Before we cut this off, let me read how we're approaching, how we're asking people to approach the voters in South Carolina. So I have all the lists of the people who took the Bernie or Bust pledge broken down by state. And so I'm emailing them today, 50 at a time, because that's all AOL will let me do. And I says, if I can just read this real quickly, because I include your post, your Bernie or Bust post.
I know, yeah. I'm very honored to hear that.
If Bernie wins again in South Carolina Saturday, it's over for the establishment. Only Bernie beats Trump is almost trending on Twitter. It wasn't even doing that a few weeks ago. Only Bernie beats Trump is a fact. We or you can support with survey and polling data. See swingvotersmatter.us, where we lay out this presentation. If you use social media, especially Twitter, please use Only Bernie Beats Trump often this week on social media and South Carolina news websites, and couple it with the swingvotersmatter.us website /information. Call in on South Carolina talk shows, et cetera, et cetera. Then I give a sample letter to the editor, then use the attached meme, which is basically alarms going off. Only Bernie beats Trump. Warning, only Bernie beats Trump. See, that's not Bernie or Bust. In fact, I go on to say, keep fighting, but don't mention Bernie or Bust.
Right.
Let Democrats figure out why they must support Bernie instead of telling them that they have to. For more on that, see this Bernie or Bust post by Keaton Weiss. And then I drop the link to your post. And I think you made a damn good point in there, which is there's got to be a softer way. Instead of telling them, here's how you're going to vote, let them figure out, oh my God, those swing voters are going to destroy us. What is it with these people? I don't know. They're a force of nature. I better vote for Bernie. Let them figure out. If they come up with it themselves, they're more inclined to go ahead and vote for Bernie than somebody saying, it's Bernie, and if it's not, we're going to destroy your party.
No, I mean, I think that's right. Obviously, I said it, so I think that's right. But but I do want to reiterate there are two exceptions to that. The Bloomberg people and the second ballot convention coup people need to be rhetorically, of course, nonviolently slapped around a little bit and be made to understand that they're not going to get away with that shit. And I think between taking that strategy with Bloomberg supporters and the convention plotters, and then, like I said, coming up with these other sort of less confrontational, less militant ways of communicating the same basic truth that's at the core of the Bernie or Bust message to well-meaning voters who are supporting some of these other candidates. I think that's a good strategy, and that's a good way to go. And we'll test that out on Super Tuesday. We'll test that even sooner in South Carolina. Hopefully we can pull this out. I mean, if we pull it out in South Carolina, like you said, I think the establishment breaks.
5 points behind as of today.
Yeah, no, we are closing the gap.
Yeah,
absolutely. So why don't you tell us, Victor, before we wrap, because we're running out of time, where people can find you, how they can follow Bernie or Bust. I know you have a site to take the pledge. How can they get on that email list so you can send them my article?
Yeah, Bernie or Bust 2020.us will get you to our website. You can take the pledge there. if you can, there's a link. So what we're trying to do is get set up for possible midterm actions. So we're asking people for their congressional district. We have a link so you can search it out and find out yourself. All that information will help us in the midterms, because this revolution isn't going to, the framers designed a system, a constitution that prevents a single election from literally completely overthrowing the government by any one party. So it's going to be multiple elections. So the midterms will be able to use more leverage, different ways, and help Bernie, with what he's going to have to do, because he's not going to start out, even if he has great coattails, and even if he gets more Democrats in Congress this time, there's not going to be enough progressives. We're still fighting the neoliberal establishment. So that's going to take 2 or 3 election cycles, and it's got to get through people's head that climate preservation absolutely requires progressive government. You're going to have to mobilize government resources, and like FDR did for World War II. That's a good analogy, and he was a progressive. You're going to need that kind of hands-on, get the government working on behalf of we the people. In this case, all the people around the world. We've got to do something, a lot, mobilize for climate preservation. What do we want? Climate preservation. What do we don't want? Well, I'm not even going to use that phrase. We need to hold on to this thing and keep this carbon down. We got to stop the methane releases that are underway. It's just going to take an awful lot of spending, an awful lot of support from Congress. So again, BurnYourBus2020.us. Get on board this independent revolutionary strategy, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, man. It was great to talk to you again. You're welcome anytime. Hopefully we'll talk soon once we get this thing wrapped up, and then we'll do maybe a pre-convention show to, in case there's any risk of shenanigans there, we'll try to get that word out.
As soon as he secures the nomination with enough delegates, I'm going to take a 1-week vacation.
Okay, well, it'll be well earned, my friend. So thank you so much for making the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, just hang on the line 1 second. I got to do a little wrap here. So you can follow us on Facebook, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, CastBox, any podcast player. Just find us, Do Dissidence. We are there. You can support this show for as little as $0.10 a day and get access to exclusive content at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Do Dissidence. All of your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. And of course, you can check out localberniecrats.com for down ballot candidates to support this Super Tuesday. Really important. There's going to be a lot of them on the ballot. And so let's make this revolution happen from the bottom up. Check them out on Facebook as well. Thanks once again to Victor Tiffany for coming on. Check out their website and all their information. I'll link to all that as we publish this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your support. We'll see you next time.
Revolt Against Plutocracy won't just be covering the news about the necessary revolution in the United States. Sometimes we'll be making the news. If you want to stay on top of the revolutionary actions and strategies of grassroots, genuine progressives, and our allies, please subscribe to our YouTube channel today.